There are two questions we've all been wanting the answer to. First, will there be another stimulus check? And second, if there is another check, when can we expect it? But a third and possibly more important question we should be wondering is, will we see a second stimulus check passed before the upcoming presidential election? And that's what we're going to explore in this video. We're going to take a look at what each side says. We'll look at the timelines, and we're going to build a realistic picture of what we can expect in terms of the stimulus check and the upcoming elections. It's currently just under 8 weeks until the presidential election, and we're in the middle of a stalemate of stimulus negotiations. But to build some context here, let's briefly talk about what happened up until now. So the CARES Act was passed March 25th of this year. This stimulus bill gave $1,200 payments to nearly 200 million Americans. This helped create some temporary relief. However, everyone realized the work is not over and we would likely need another bill. 2 months later, the House of Representatives passed the HEROES Act, a massive $3.4 trillion bill that covered everything from stimulus checks to state funding. The Senate and many Republicans recognized that there is a need for another spending bill. However, they decided it'd be best to wait and see if the economy recovers enough by itself without more spending. Some time passes and the Senate leaves for their July 4th recess, returning late that month, expecting to get a stimulus bill passed. They get back from recess and hold a legislative bender trying to write a bill before enhanced unemployment expires by the end of July. Long story short, that didn't happen. Democrats wanted a bill triple the size Republicans wanted, and progress really wasn't happening. So they said, all right, well, if we're not going to work on a deal, we might as well go and work on our tans and go back to recess. This is when President Trump steps in and lays down his 4 executive orders addressing unemployment, student loans, rent moratoriums, and a payroll tax deferral. The president did this to put pressure on Congress to work out a deal more quickly, but unfortunately, it actually had the opposite effect, and legislators kind of took their foot off the proverbial gas. Negotiations are still at an impasse with only small inches towards the other side's numbers. And finally, this week, the Senate unveiled their skinny bill, which comes in about half the size of their last offer. And of course, this was shut down and rejected by the Democratic side. So now we're back to present day. We have the context. Let's explore what each side is saying about the stimulus in relation to the election. 2 days ago, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell accused Democrats of sabotaging stimulus negotiations as a tactic to help a Democratic victory in the presidential vote. But is that really the case? It's hard to say exactly, but let's look at the facts. There was a Republican bill, the skinny bill, that was blocked by Democrats. Yes, that's a fact. However, it's hard to argue that was sabotage because of the elections. I don't believe that bill would have been passed any time in the past 4 months. All along this process, Democrats have said they don't want a pared down deal. They want one big comprehensive deal. Whether you agree with their stance or not, we can agree that their sentiment has been the same long before elections were near. Looking at some more comments from the Republican side, Senator Marco Rubio said on Twitter, quote, "Congress is not going to pass another COVID relief bill before the election starts." And then he followed that by saying, "But I hope I'm wrong." Senator Pat Roberts said stimulus talks are sort of a dead-end street. And Senator Richard Shelby said, unless something really broke through, it's not going to happen. So on the Republican side, it seems hopes are pretty low here. Now let's look at what the Democratic side is saying about the stimulus in relation to the election. My first thought while researching this video was to check the frequency of comments by key Democrats like Nancy Pelosi and Charles Schumer about them wanting to get a bill passed, and comparing that recently versus a few weeks ago to see if there was any change. Because if a few weeks ago they were saying, let's get a bill, let's get a bill, let's get a bill, but in present day, they're quiet, it might be an indication that they're holding off until after the elections. And I was surprised to see that the frequency in these comments by those key Democrats really hasn't gone down. Nancy Pelosi said just yesterday, we don't want to go home without a bill, but you don't want to be a cheap date. When you are in a negotiation, the last place to get weak knees is at the end. And on this, Schumer also said he was confident in the stimulus talks, that they weren't finished, by saying Republicans have changed their minds in past coronavirus negotiations and would feel the pressure to act before the election. So it seems like they aren't just trying to put things off until the election, which is good news for the Americans who are in need. Here's the Democratic plan as of right now. Some House members have brought up the idea of passing an additional stimulus bill now so they can show that they're doing something, but this idea was shot down, and instead Democrats are going to wait for Republicans to come to them on this. That's interesting. Look who decided to use the old wait and see method this time. Hopefully it works out a little bit better this time. Now it's really up to Republicans to decide how much getting a stimulus passed would help out the presidential election, and if they're willing to concede that much more money for the sake of those elections. As of right now, the highest Republican offer is $1.5 trillion, and the lowest Democratic offer is $2.2 trillion, making the current difference between package sizes $700 billion. I have to admit, Democrats seem to have the power seat here in these negotiations as of right now. Undoubtedly, the president would like to be able to say he got more stimulus for the people and to have that done before the election. I really think if Republicans made an offer of $1.8 trillion or around there, we would see a resolution here and a package that contains everything we need, from school funding, stimulus checks, to some state funding, all the major issues that really need funding right now. But all this isn't to say that Democrats don't have any pressure on them too. They are very aware of the public perception of incompetence right now. Representative John Yarmouth sums it up better than I ever could, and this is a quote directly from him. He says, "I think most Americans right now look at it and say, these people are just pathetic. They can't come together when people are suffering, and they can't come together on a reasonable package. So I think showing that we're reasonable would be important. I'd like to see us do it before we break for campaign next month." So let's summarize all of this. Republicans no doubt want to give aid to the people. They want to look competent, and they want to help the elections if they can. But they'll have to agree on more spending to do so. Democrats no doubt want to give aid to the people. They also want to look competent and pass something quickly. But they have some conflict. Democrats are better off election-wise if a package is passed after the presidential elections. However, if they wait until after the elections, they also lose their leverage. It's pretty tricky. Taking all this into consideration, I'm giving it a 60% chance that something gets passed before the presidential election. I generally have a positive outlook, and I'm choosing to believe that odds are in favor of something good happening here and the people who need relief finding some relief sooner than later. If something does get passed, let's look at a timeline that we can expect. The CARES Act was passed in the Senate March 25th, and then signed in the House the 26th, and then signed by the President on the 27th. Checks were then sent out beginning on April 15th, and millions of Americans had received payment by the end of April, 20 to 35 days after it was signed into law. This means if the Senate passes a bill the 23rd of this month, followed by the House the 24th and the President the 25th, the first checks would actually be expected to be sent out sometime around the 30th of September. If a bill is completely signed in by October 20th, we would see the first checks sent again the following week. Payments will likely be sent much faster the second time because the same system would be used unless there are major changes to the parameters of who received checks, maybe the amount. If something is majorly changed, there could be a delay, but if everything is the same, like it likely will be, then we could see payments much faster than the first time. So this is all we have for today. What are your thoughts on all this? Do you think we're going to get something passed before the elections? Let me know in the comments. Let's have a little conversation about this. And until next time, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I hope you have a profitable day.